On the surface, Courtney Hadwin seemed like just another shy teenager, trembling under the weight of a massive stage and unforgiving spotlight. Her quiet voice and nervous posture suggested fragility, uncertainty, and fear. But in a matter of seconds, that fragile image shattered. As the music surged, a raw, untamed force erupted from within her, transforming hesitation into thunder. By the time the final note faded, Simon Cowell, known for emotional restraint, sat visibly shaken, fighting back tears, witnessing a moment that redefined belief. Long before the world would learn her name, Courtney Hadwin lived quietly, tucked away in the corners of ordinary life, where silence felt safer than attention and solitude offered refuge from overwhelming noise. Born in England, she grew up as a deeply introverted child, navigating a world that often felt too loud, too fast, and too demanding. Social situations were not just uncomfortable, they were paralyzing. Eye contact felt intrusive. Public speaking triggered panic. Even the simplest conversations carried an exhausting emotional weight. In classrooms, she rarely raised her hand. Among classmates, she struggled to find belonging. While others built friendships and confidence, Courtney retreated inward, protecting herself through distance. Teachers recognized her intelligence, but her shyness often masked her abilities. To many, she appeared withdrawn, hesitant, and fragile, easy to overlook in a system designed to reward loudness and assertiveness. Inside, however, a restless emotional energy churned, searching for release. Music became that release. Behind closed doors, alone in her room, Courtney discovered voices that mirrored her own unspoken intensity. The raw emotion of Janis Joplin, the commanding fire of Tina Turner, the aching soul of Otis Redding, these were not just songs to her. They were emotional lifelines. Through them, she learned that pain could be transformed into power, fear into expression, and silence into sound. Singing allowed her to articulate emotions she could never verbalize. In melody, she found freedom. In rhythm, control. In lyrics, truth. Yet, the idea of performing publicly remained a towering barrier. Talent existed, but confidence did not. Every imagined spotlight amplified her anxiety. The fear of judgment, rejection, and failure loomed relentlessly. The stage represented exposure, and exposure felt dangerous. When the opportunity to audition for America's Got Talent arrived, it forced a reckoning. The invitation carried promise, but also threat. A single performance could unlock unimaginable opportunity or confirm her deepest insecurities. The scale of the show, broadcast to millions, intensified the pressure. For Courtney, the decision was not about ambition, it was about survival. The risk of humiliation weighed heavily, yet the desire to be heard burned quietly beneath the fear. Family support became the fragile bridge between hesitation and action. Encouragement came not as pressure, but as belief, steady, patient, unwavering. Slowly, resolve took shape. Courtney agreed to step forward, not because fear had vanished, but because remaining silent felt even more unbearable. Still, insecurity followed her onto that stage. As the curtains parted and the lights flooded her vision, the full weight of the moment descended. The vast auditorium, the towering judge's desk, the cameras, the crowd. Her body responded instantly. Shoulders curved inward. Hands trembled. Her voice quivered as she spoke. Each movement reflected vulnerability. To the audience, she appeared small, overwhelmed, fragile, a nervous teenager standing before an impossible test. The judges leaned in cautiously. Simon Cowell, renowned for his sharp critique and emotional restraint, studied her carefully. His expression revealed skepticism, not cruelty, but measured doubt. Experience had taught him that nerves often foretold disappointment. The room braced for uncertainty. Everything about Courtney's presence suggested hesitation, fear, and fragility. Few in the audience anticipated anything beyond a timid attempt. Fewer still imagined greatness. The atmosphere settled into a tense stillness, suspended between expectation and disbelief. But beneath that trembling exterior, something ancient stirred. Years of suppressed emotion. Endless private rehearsals. Countless nights singing alone into darkness. All of it waited, compressed beneath fragile composure, ready to erupt. The silence stretched, heavy and electric, as Courtney stood poised between retreat and release. What followed next would transform hesitation into history and silence into shock. The opening seconds were fragile. Courtney stood motionless, her breath shallow, her posture guarded, her gaze fixed somewhere just beyond the blinding lights. The music had not yet begun, but tension already filled the room. Every instinct urged retreat. Every nerve signaled danger. The audience leaned forward, sensing vulnerability, uncertain what would unfold. For a fleeting moment, doubt hovered heavily in the air. Then the first note hit. What followed was not gradual. It was explosive. In a single breath, the fragile image dissolved. Courtney's voice erupted, raw, thunderous, and unrestrained. The timid posture vanished, replaced by a wild, commanding presence that seemed to seize the entire stage. Her movements became feral, untamed, unpredictable. Each note carried emotional weight far beyond technical precision, fueled by years of suppressed feeling and silent endurance. The transformation was instant and overwhelming. The audience gasped. Judges stiffened in disbelief. Skepticism shattered under the force of her sound. Her voice surged through the auditorium like electricity, bending expectation, tearing through hesitation. She did not merely sing, she unleashed. Pain, defiance, longing, rebellion, and hope collided within every phrase. Each lyric felt lived rather than rehearsed. Each growl, scream, and whisper reflected an emotional depth rarely witnessed from someone so young. What made the performance extraordinary was not just vocal power, but emotional authenticity. Courtney was not performing confidence, she was channeling survival. The stage became a battleground where fear was confronted head-on. Every movement reflected a refusal to remain unseen. Every note demanded recognition. The crowd responded instinctively. Silence gave way to stunned awe. Then, slowly, applause built, swelling into thunder. Strangers locked eyes in disbelief. Some clutched their chests. Others wiped away tears. The emotional impact rippled outward, uniting the room in collective shock. At the judges' table, disbelief transformed into reverence. Heidi Klum's eyes widened. Howie Mandel leaned forward, visibly shaken. And Simon Cowell, famously reserved, emotionally guarded, and difficult to impress, sat frozen. The performance pierced through layers of professional detachment. His expression softened. His eyes glistened. The moment breached emotional armor built over decades of criticism and competition. For Simon, it was not just about technical brilliance. It was about witnessing something profoundly human, a young girl confronting fear and converting it into raw power. Tears welled, betraying the depth of his reaction. The magnitude of the moment transcended entertainment. It became personal. As the final note echoed into silence, Courtney stood breathless, her chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. The audience erupted. The ovation was immediate, explosive, relentless. Cheers thundered through the hall, crashing against the walls, flooding the stage. It was not applause alone, it was release. In that instant, Courtney ceased to be a nervous teenager. She became a revelation. Judges rose to their feet. Praise poured forth, but words struggled to capture the enormity of what had just occurred. Compliments faltered beneath awe. Simon spoke of authenticity, originality, and raw genius, rare language reserved for rare moments. His voice trembled slightly, revealing emotional vulnerability seldom displayed. But beneath the celebration, a deeper emotional battle lingered unseen. Because triumph does not erase anxiety. Success does not silence fear. And a single moment, no matter how powerful, cannot undo years of internal struggle. For Courtney, the applause was intoxicating, but it also carried an unbearable new weight: expectation. Behind the roaring crowd and glowing praise, the fragile girl still existed, now standing beneath a spotlight brighter than ever before. And that spotlight would soon expose vulnerabilities far deeper than nerves. Because the greatest struggle was not winning the stage, it was surviving the world beyond it. Fame arrived suddenly, violently, and without warning. One moment, Courtney Hadwin was a shy teenager standing alone beneath blinding lights. The next, her face was everywhere, broadcast across continents, dissected online, praised, judged, and endlessly replayed. What appeared to be a dream realized quickly revealed itself as an emotional crucible. Behind closed doors, the reality was far more complex. Sudden recognition intensified every vulnerability she had spent years trying to manage. Interviews, rehearsals, travel, and relentless attention stripped away the quiet spaces that once protected her. The same anxiety that once whispered now roared. Each performance carried unbearable stakes. Every public appearance demanded emotional armor she had never learned to build. Social media magnified the pressure. Praise surged in tidal waves, but criticism followed just as fiercely. Strangers analyzed her body language, voice, personality, and identity with merciless precision. Support uplifted, yet scrutiny cut deeper. The fragile balance between confidence and collapse became increasingly difficult to maintain. Behind the scenes, exhaustion took hold. Long days blurred into restless nights. The constant demand to remain extraordinary eroded emotional stability. Courtney struggled to reconcile her explosive stage persona with her naturally reserved self. The contradiction fractured her sense of identity. On stage, she embodied raw defiance. Off stage, she longed for silence and invisibility. That emotional split bred confusion, isolation, and inner turmoil. For a teenager still discovering who she was, the burden proved overwhelming. There were moments when doubt resurfaced with crushing force. Moments when fear whispered that the success was accidental, that the applause was temporary, that the expectations were impossible to satisfy. The weight of being seen, truly seen, became heavier than the weight of being ignored. Yet, amid the chaos, anchors remained. Family stood firmly beside her, shielding her from the harshest edges of exposure. Trusted mentors helped navigate an industry built on relentless momentum. Slowly, Courtney learned that resilience was not about constant strength, it was about controlled vulnerability. Rest became as vital as rehearsal. Reflection became as necessary as performance. Through therapy, distance, and emotional recalibration, she began to confront the deeper roots of her anxiety. The process was neither quick nor linear. Some days brought clarity. Others reopened old wounds. But gradually, understanding replaced confusion. Fear loosened its grip. She started to realize that the stage did not define her. It amplified her. And amplification required emotional grounding. This internal reckoning reshaped her relationship with success. No longer driven solely by external validation, Courtney began seeking authenticity. She learned to set boundaries, to listen to her own emotional limits, to protect the quiet spaces that allowed creativity to breathe. But recovery does not mean retreat. From that fragile recalibration emerged a new awareness, one that would redefine her future. The question was no longer whether she could perform. It was whether she could transform pain into purpose. Distance became a form of survival. Stepping away from relentless exposure, Courtney retreated from the noise that had consumed her world. The silence she once feared slowly transformed into sanctuary. In those quiet moments, stripped of expectation and applause, she confronted the most difficult question of all, who she truly was beneath the performance. For years, her identity had been shaped by reaction. Applause dictated confidence. Criticism ignited doubt. Fame blurred the boundary between authentic self and projected image. Now, removed from constant judgment, Courtney began rebuilding from within. Music reclaimed its original role, not spectacle, but expression. She returned to songwriting, not to impress, but to process. Each lyric carried fragments of lived experience, isolation, pressure, fear, resilience. These compositions were not polished for mass approval. They were honest,
Raw.
imperfect, and through that imperfection, healing emerged. Music once again became therapy, not obligation. Gradually, emotional stability followed. She redefined success, shifting focus from viral recognition to artistic growth. The need to constantly prove herself dissolved into a desire to understand herself. Confidence evolved, no longer explosive, but grounded. Where fear once dictated behavior, intention now led. In this recalibration, Courtney discovered emotional autonomy. She learned when to step forward and when to step back. She learned to protect her mental health without surrendering ambition. The stage transformed from battlefield into canvas, a place of creation rather than confrontation. Creative exploration deepened. Her voice matured. Her artistry expanded. Rather than chasing the intensity of her breakthrough, she embraced nuance, vulnerability, and emotional range. This evolution signaled not retreat, but refinement. Behind the scenes, discipline replaced desperation. Patience replaced urgency. She began constructing a career not built on fleeting spectacle, but on longevity and truth. Each decision reflected intentional growth rather than reactionary survival. Yet, no amount of reinvention could erase the moment that launched her into global consciousness. That singular performance remained suspended in time, a point of origin, a symbolic crossing from fear into power. It continued to echo across audiences worldwide, reshaping perceptions of talent, courage, and vulnerability. And with every retelling of that night, Courtney's journey gained deeper meaning. Because that moment was never solely hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt invisible, everyone who had ever doubted their own voice, everyone who stood trembling at the edge of possibility. The transformation was no longer just personal. It had become universal, because the moment that changed her life would ultimately redefine millions of others. Some performances fade with time. They exist briefly, then dissolve into the endless tide of entertainment. Courtney Hadwin's audition did the opposite. It endured. It settled into cultural memory, not as spectacle, but as symbol, a testament to the hidden power that lies within fragile beginnings. Long after the applause had faded, the moment continued to reverberate. Viewers across continents returned to that performance, searching not only for vocal brilliance, but for emotional truth. What they found was recognition. In Courtney's trembling entrance and explosive transformation, millions saw reflections of their own quiet battles, anxiety, fear, self-doubt, and longing for acceptance. Simon Cowell's emotional reaction became an inseparable part of that legacy. Known for measured critique and guarded composure, his tears carried weight. They signaled that something deeply human had occurred. Not just talent, but courage. Not just entertainment, but authenticity. His response validated what audiences instinctively felt, that this was not a performance engineered for approval, but an emotional breakthrough unfolding in real time. For countless young viewers struggling with insecurity, Courtney's journey offered something rare: permission to believe. Her story dismantled the assumption that confidence must precede success. Instead, it revealed that courage often emerges through fear, not beyond it. That vulnerability can coexist with strength. That fragility can become force. Educators referenced her performance as a case study in emotional resilience. Parents shared it with children facing anxiety. Therapists pointed to it as an example of emotional expression as healing. Across demographics, her story resonated because it mirrored lived experience. Yet, legacy is not measured solely by inspiration. It is measured by endurance. Courtney's journey did not conclude with a standing ovation. It continued through artistic growth, emotional recalibration, and evolving identity. The moment that introduced her to the world became the foundation upon which she would build a life, not defined by fear, but shaped by authenticity. Years from now, her AGT audition will still stand as proof that transformation does not require perfection. It requires truth. And truth, when finally unleashed, can move even the most guarded hearts. Because in that fragile silence before the storm, a voice waited. And when it finally rose, it reminded the world of something it often forgets. Because sometimes, the quietest voice carries the loudest truth.